Welcome, everyone. A very warm welcome to all those who've joined us from different parts of the globe. Hi, my name is Vidya. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Fitbots, and absolutely delighted to be hosting this webinar on the top priorities for the Chief of Staff. Now, I know that we've got a whole bunch of people joining in, and some of you who've asked for a webinar recording as well. But just to get this started, we'd love to ask a question to all those who have joined. What do you love about being a Chief of Staff? And for those who are playing this role and who are part of the audience, you can put it up in the chat window or in the Q&A window, whichever is working for you. So let's see some answers there. What do you love about being a Chief of Staff? Okay, I think Kyra just raised her hand. Okay, Kyra, I think you probably may need to put it in the chat window so that we can see that. Okay, or the Q&A window. Okay, deep business understanding. So that's the first response. That's fantastic. Thank you for that. We're doing a quick poll. For those who just joined, what do you love about being a Chief of Staff? So we got one more. Oh, this is a good one. View from the top. Okay, sorry about that. The chat is not working, so do put it in the Q&A window. Awesome. So let's see a few more. How varied the role is, looking through internal or the organization and being involved in 4 strategic projects. Love that. Thank you, Kyra. Okay, great. These are some really amazing answers. And just as we go into the next question, oh, here's another one. Working closely with founders and having a holistic view of whatever happens in the company, and also pursuing different interests and use skills in different areas. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much for these amazing, amazing answers. Now, just before we get into the webinar, we'd love to ask you, what probably is something that you wish you wouldn't do being part of the Chief of Staff role? Okay, so something that you'd like to drop out of your list. Okay, data consolidation. Yeah, that's something that we can relate to. Okay, so we do see that this one around micromanaging. Okay, it's something that CEOs do not like. We agree with that. All right, so do keep your responses coming. Office and administrative work, that's something we definitely have heard a lot. And I'm sure we're going to talk through that, especially when we have a conversation with Mackenzie on the top priorities of the Chief of Staff for 2023. So on that note, I would like to give a very warm welcome, extend a very warm welcome to all those who have joined us. My name is Vidya. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Fitbots. Started Fitbots with the passion of taking objectives and key results to companies globally. Something that you don't know about me is that I'm also a certified OKRs coach. So what we really realized is we're more than just software. We started coaching teams to learn more about how to run OKRs effectively and took that into building a world-class software. But something that I really like about OKRs is that I get to interact with many, many Chief of Staff in my role, because Chief of Staff are amazing sponsors as well as champions of OKRs. A little more about Fitbots. We're really an end-to-end experience. We've got our software along with coaching and certifications on OKRs to get teams spun up on the process. But today is less about us and more about this conversation that you're going to have with Mackenzie. So on that note, I'd love to introduce Mackenzie to everyone. Mackenzie is the CEO of Cedar. Cedar connects executives to high-performing Chief of Staff. He's also a Chief of Staff content creator. For those who have actually missed out on the content that's created by Mackenzie, would really encourage you to download those amazing ebooks and templates, because there's so much more to learn about it. Mackenzie has spent over 10 years in Fortune 1000 companies and startups. He was also the founder of an organization, and in the past was an investment analyst at a firm founded by Goldman Sachs. So on that note, I'd love to introduce Mackenzie to actually come out on stage and introduce speak a little more about yourself and what you do at Cedar.
Thanks so much for the warm welcome, Vidya. And hi, guys, everyone. Mackenzie Lee here, CEO at Cedar. Vidya already took, I think, the juiciest parts from my bio, from my playbook. So I think you've already seen on the screen. But some more about me. I've been lucky to play really important roles for leaders, but it was just until I played a de facto Chief of Staff role where I really saw the power of the role and inspired me to create my company, Cedar. And for many people on the call, because you already are a Chief of Staff or have interfaced with one, I'm sure you guys also agree, there's such a transformative effect that the Chief of Staff has on literally everyone, the CEO, the executive team, employees, interfacing with the board, investors, and of course, the development path of the Chief of Staff himself. So that really inspired me to create companies solely dedicated towards everything related to the Chief of Staff. So today I provide advisory services. I provide executive search services, and I also do on-demand chief of staff for folks that want to bring in a talented resource almost immediately.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Mackenzie. And I'm sure there's lots that we're going to dip into your experience of having worked with many, many chief of staff and principal across the globe. So just so that we get the logistics of the webinar in order, we'll pause every few minutes to take questions from the audience, because today it's really about this interaction so that we learn more about the priorities that you're managing and also what are some of the global priorities that chief of staff are actually focusing on, which will be an additional learning. So let's kick it off with the first question that we have. So Mackenzie, in your role, you really interact with a spectrum of chief of staff. And I was actually reading this amazing playbook that you put together, where you speak about, before you started Cedar, you actually spoke to a number of principals, and in this case, founders, really trying to understand the role of chief of staff. And you found that there's a spectrum because you've interacted with companies which are scale-ups or venture-funded startups or bootstrap startups, all the way to large enterprises. So tell us a little more about what have you seen in this specific role?
That's a great question. The chief of staff role is really dependent on what the environment that they're operating in, whether it's a small team, whether it's a big team. They need to also mold their capabilities to support their principal to their maximum potential. So maybe their principal has a spike in ABC, and therefore the chief of staff has spikes in XYZ. So there's actually quite a lot of variation, and that requires, I think, a little bit of a specialist approach to defining the roles and capabilities of the chief of staff, again, dependent on the environment. So, with startups, there's oftentimes, growth problems that need to be solved, or people ops problems that need to be solved. Fundraising obviously is a huge, focus. If you don't have any money and you can't keep the lights on, then the company is no longer available. And then also there's this concept of, doing your tour of duty for about 18 months and then exiting to a director role within the startup. And so those are some, characteristics around scale ups that I found with the chief of staff. And of course, with large enterprises, it's more about executing a rhythm of cadence, a cadence of the business on a regular basis, making sure that change management happens in a very steady way with defined strategic initiatives that are being tracked, over multiple months, if not years, right? There's also this concept of, titling that I've seen in large enterprises. So instead of just chief of staff, it says director, chief of staff, or VP or SVP. And that also indicates like the seniority of this resource, and honestly the pay as well, the compensation for that resource. There's more professionalization of the chief of staff role within larger enterprises because they value a little more stability, because it's more BAU rather than scale ups, which are moving from series B, C, D, going through different changes that require maybe new chiefs of staff to come in again every 18 to 24 months.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Thank you for sharing that. Just to segue into the current context that we're all facing. I read a great article which said that the economy is unwell. So there's a lot going on right from 3 years back. There was this global pandemic, and now we have this entire backdrop of crisis, which is happening probably in banks, or let's say global tech companies are laying off folks. So really there's something which is going on across the globe. And incidentally, I also saw a post that you've done, Mackenzie, where you said, there's a 6x ROI to the role of the chief of staff. So tell us a little more about, when the economy is going through these blips, how pertinent is the role of the chief of staff and, the ROI of the role as well, both together.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I think at the highest level, what we're seeing is that, there's more risk, there's more uncertainty, what is it in physics, right? The chaos of the world is just increasing and increasing. You can't put things back into Pandora's box. So what that requires is for business leaders and chiefs of staff to be highly flexible and reactive to whatever environment that they're in. And so between, COVID or Ukraine war or tech stocks going down, obviously SVB, you have to be at the ready to respond to what's going on. And so, it obviously has an impact on the companies that I'm working with. And so again, that flexibility and responsiveness is important. COVID has now made people more remote, obviously, and then it's led to a breakdown in the communication between different business units because the norms and the patterns of communication aren't there. Again, you have these silos. So that's where really the chief of staff can come in and promote that communication between departments, make sure that the glue is there between people, and promote collaboration. Now, with the tech stocks being down, obviously there's reductions in force that have been happening. Honestly, I would say across the board. I mean, it's kind of like who's next? And even if you cut 10%, there might be another additional 5 to 10%. The CFO and the CEO and the chief, HR director, people officer are all, having a pulse on what's going on, and investors are also demanding this type of, austerity. I think Mark Zuckerberg used the word efficiency. I think I read the New York Times like maybe 20 times in his latest investment call. And so really trying to signal the discipline that's needed. And so again, the chief of staff needs to be able to implement some of these austerity or efficiency, measures. They need to do the right talent mapping to make sure that the right people are in the right place doing the right jobs. Those are some other effects. And then obviously with the banking crisis, it's not good. It's the cost of capital has gone up, and startups are hurting for cash, and they have less customers, and it's harder to do deals. So they are stressed out. So, startup founders are stressed out, and that's again where the chief of staff can help impose better cost controls and discipline to the companies to make sure that they survive. They want to keep their people. They don't want to fire people. So those are some aspects of how the environment is affecting the day-to-day of the chief of staff and their leaders.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you, because I think the role is actually a force multiplier today. And if played right, it can really have an impact, not only in times when times are good, but especially when times are uncertain, the impact could be even larger. Gets us to the topic of the webinar, which is really on the top priorities for 2023. And in your spectrum of interacting with many chief of staff, if you could talk to us a little bit about what are the priorities of chief of staff, and does it vary from scale-ups to large enterprises? What do you see in these two segments?
Yeah, I hinted at it in my last response. Keeping the lights on, right? Making sure there's enough cash in the bank to survive. There's enough runway ahead of you. To the extent you need to raise, making sure you raise on stronger fundamentals so that you're not, you're not paying a lot of money for extra capital to come in. So really, how do you do this? You have to go back to the fundamentals, like I mentioned. You have to make sure that the cost structure is in line with industry expectations. And you have to make some painful decisions on where you're going to put your bets. Going back to the go-to-market engine and really using a root cause analysis lens to see at every point of the funnel where you're falling down, where the conversion rate is not working. You got to be really, it's back to, I think, management consulting 101. You look at the revenue, you look at the costs, and you see where you can optimize both. And you're being, hopefully data driven in some of these approaches. So really, trying to protect your company, retain your customers, upsell the existing ones, and then, making sure the cost base is reasonable and right-sized to whatever you're trying to do. Those are some things that I advise leaders on when I hear them, worried about what they're thinking about doing. A lot of the, perceived frivolous, future-looking labs or extra innovation projects, they are being cut. Google X, for example, I think, really downsized its operations. And, my boyfriend actually client was at Google, and obviously this is affecting everyone in the ecosystem. So just being really smart about capital allocation, is I think the name of the game.
Excellent. Thank you, Mackenzie, for sharing those perspectives. In fact, we're going to open it out to the audience. And, Mackenzie just shared many pertinent points around the top priorities that he's been seeing across a spectrum of customers, as well as, folks who are really helping their principals really run the business and change the business. And Mackenzie spoke about the fundraising, go-to-market, really upselling and ensuring that the lights are on, right? And we survive through this uncertainty. Would love to hear from the audience on questions that you have for Mackenzie. And additionally, is there something else that which is being placed as a priority in your mind? So let's get some questions over. Okay, so here's the first one. How is the role of chief of staff changing in 2023? So I think the question is coming more from when times were good to times which are uncertain. Are there some shifts that you're seeing in the role from, let's say, a couple of years back to today? And I think the follow-on question is, how do you align teams using a data-driven approach? Because I think there's one point that you mentioned, Mackenzie, was using the power of data, so connecting the dots between the two. So would love to hear your response.
Yeah, the change again, because the economic environment has shifted, it's what is the leader priority? Now we have to conserve cash, right? We're not going to be raising these big rounds and we're not going to be hiring a lot of people. We have to be smart about executing on the work we have with the people that we have, and maybe even doing more if possible. So that's one thing. Obviously, the big name, the big, headline of 2023 is AI. And so the more you can incorporate smart AI practices into your business, the more efficiencies you're getting and the more that people can do in their day-to-day job. So, they actually can produce more. Obviously, the winners are going to be the ones that do it correctly, that integrate multiple AI tools in a stack, and are doing things that their competitors aren't, to get that leverage. And then the last point around data-driven approach, if you're in a company that doesn't have a data-driven approach, it's very difficult, right? You can't just change everything, change not only the hearts and minds first, but then the practices. Like that's a big, ordeal. So, what I recommend with any sort of change management is start small, right? Think about one project that you can say, hey, we're going to be really data driven and get sponsorship from your CEO on it, right? And this is what we're going to do. And tell everyone, hey, we're going to go get this data. We're going to do the right type of analysis. And we're going to tell everyone what happens and show and tell by doing, right? And show that success through that approach with that one project that has that sponsorship, and then get other people excited about that methodology. And so, maybe the chief of staff could be this chief data, officer champion or something like that, right? That's maybe a way to align the teams using data-driven approach. It has to come from the top and have the sponsorship. Obviously, if you have the know-how, and someone who can raise their hand on the IC level, that's amazing. So you can partner with them and bring their expertise to the front. That's really important. And then, again, let's face it, the winners are the ones that use a data-driven approach. Like you're not going to win in 2023 if you just kind of like shoot everywhere and try to like get deals done. And so, tying the outcomes of that project or approach to the wins, then people will say, oh, I want to do that data-driven approach, right? I think that's smart for my team. And that will, be the kernel of what you can do to promote data-driven approach in teams.
Yeah, thank you, Mackenzie. And, we hope that answered your question really well. In fact, we've got a whole bunch of questions coming in, and this is from Vidya. And Vidya's question is, when talking about optimization and efficiency, how does the chief of staff role enable team planning? And I think there's also a follow-on statement which says, many a times it becomes tough to explain to teams, why not to go far for quality or quantity in terms of talent. So you're really trying to get a lot more done from, teams which are existing. So a little bit around team planning, and if that's something which is pertinent for the COS role that you've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I just connected with a fellow Stanford alum, go Stanford, by the way, who is in the chief of staff spot. And they actually are in a good position that they're well funded and they have a lot of work to be done. And he's overloaded. And I'm like, okay, let's do a talent mapping exercise together, right? Let's look at all the strategic priorities you're trying to hit. Let's look at the roadmap, and then let's look at the existing org to see who's going to be doing all this work to get you where you need to go, right? That type of talent map just opens your eyes to the current state, and then you can understand the gap to goal, right? What kind of skills? And by the way, you don't need to hire people internally. We're in 2023. There's amazing professional services that are fractional, on demand, that are out there that can be, delivered almost instantly. And obviously, you're going to pay a little bit of premium for it. And it takes a little bit of expert skill to define the scope and the relationship and the fees, right? So that you're not getting fleeced. But that type of on-demand talent just on a project basis can be actually really cost effective and less risky for the org because you're not taking on a full-time employee. That's the type of conversation I'm having right now in the context of 2023, where you got to be smart about your talent bets, but you got to know exactly, if you know who you are, what you need, and the target is, you can plug it in a very specialized way. So that you got to partner with your HR person and your chief people person. They are your best friend here, and you got to come up with some creative solutions to solving some of these talent problems.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Going on to another question, and I'll probably take the one around strategy, execution, and OKRs a little, towards the webinar, mid of the webinar. But this one's an interesting one, and this is about strategic conflicts in the role of a chief of staff, because you're really looking horizontally across the company, and how do you really deliver to the founder's office? And I'm not sure whether the chief of staff have conflicts with their own principles, but I'm sure, just getting, the entire organization together, there could be some strategic conflicts. So how should, they maneuver through it? I think that's the question.
I love this topic. And actually, I just had a coaching session yesterday with an existing chief of staff. And she actually came through the EA path. She was an EA, senior EA, then now junior chief of staff. I've been kind of coaching her on letting go of some of her conceptions of being an EA, which is just making everyone feel good and, everyone working together, harmony, no conflict, to now being in a role where actually her value is promoting healthy conflict, not only within her team, but also with her boss, right? And so it's a mindset change and a habit change she needs to go through. And, I love this type of coaching exercise. And conflict is so important to get to the best ideas, the best outcomes, and it needs to be managed in the right way so it's not contagious in a way that, colors the relationships. And so it's a fine line. What I would say is first look at the styles that are dominant within your existing culture, right? And some are more conflict, healthy, and some are conflict averse, and some people are conflict unhealthy, right? So you got to think about where you are, and then if you do want to start promoting more conflict in a healthy way, you have to get, like I said, with the data-driven thing, you gotta get the sponsorship from your boss, and then you gotta model it in the right way and put parameters around it so people don't go off the rails and start attacking people. So that's where conflict is important. And honestly, in 2023, conflict needs to happen because, again, we're making hard decisions and there's not a lot of money around. Like they say, business is like parenting. You're gonna fight over the kids and you're gonna fight over the finances. So there's definitely a lot of that going on right now. Like, who should we keep on the team? And also, how much money do we have left in the bank? Those are tough issues. And so approaching it with data-driven, back to the data-driven concept, approaching it with like the best idea wins approach is the healthy way of doing conflict.
Awesome. Thank you, Mackenzie. And, it's a good segue to something that you've really published or created content a lot around, which is on the skills which are required for the chief of staff role. And probably comfort with conflict probably is one of them in response to what you just said. So are there any specific skills that you see stand out, which every chief of staff role can hone as they move further in their careers?
Wow, what an amazing question, because it's not only a question on what are the key attributes and characteristics of a successful chief of staff, but it's also talking about what is the exit opportunity and the development path of the chief of staff. So I tried to codify all of this in what I call high performance chief of staff assessment. And, it's 70 questions on 5 sections. There's a section on hard skills, soft skills, character traits, well-being outside of work, actually. And then the chief of staff on the job. So what are very specific tasks or experiences they need to execute on. There's table stakes chief of staff skills that I think are important. I won't get into them, but some of the more advanced ones I think are important to touch on. And that really separates a great from an elite chief of staff. And, on the hard skills side, it's change management, it's, investor and board management. It's on the soft skills, it's conflict management, which we just talked about. It's kind of this scrappiness, can do, entrepreneurial attitude, I will just get it done type of temperament. And, it's all the aspects of a great leader, right? It's, can you be inspirational, get people to rally around you? And actually, the chief of staff role it's dotted line everywhere. There's no stalled line anywhere. It's just dotted lines everywhere in the organization and also outside. So the soft power you have to have in order to be a successful chief of staff, I think is amazing, right? If you can convince people with soft power, then imagine what you can do with hard power. So those are some of the characteristics that the chief of staff will hold with them. And then I wrote a post on the exit opportunities, the 7 exit opportunities for the chief of staff. Obviously, they can go into a director role. They can take a VC role. They can start their own company. They can go into consulting, maybe even private equity. That's because they have had such a supercharged MBA as being a chief of staff. And they've been so proximate to their leader that they've been learning by doing and by proximity. They're equipped also with the relationships from their investors that they've interfaced with the entire time as a chief of staff. So they're a highly capable, Swiss Army knife, sometimes with those advanced skills. And it's really, the world's our oysters is the way that I like to think, when they're exiting from the role. And that's really why, having a very strong target exit opportunity and conviction, and obviously narrative and branding will allow them to land where they want to land. It's a way to skip level your career very quickly. And that's why MBAs are really moving away from management consulting or finance to now pinging me saying, hey, I want a chief of staff job. And even when they're at a consulting firm, my sister's at McKinsey, for example, in London, she's like, you're going to get me the best chief of staff job, right? And I was like, don't worry, I got you. So, that's, those are some thoughts I have on, the skills that the chief of staff picks up, the temperament traits that they develop, and then also the exit opportunities that they have once they leave the role.
Yeah, I love what you said, because this entire skill, the will and well-being, that's an important aspect that you also brought in. So tell us a little more about well-being and how does that really get into the chief of staff role?
I love this. I love this question. And thank you for bringing us back to this concept. Look, if we didn't learn anything from the pandemic, then we are doomed as a society, right? If we did not learn that the things that are outside of work affects us at work, then we are regressing. We're going back to the Middle Ages. So I break it down in physical, mental, and spiritual well-being when I'm looking at the health of a leader and also, the performance of a chief of staff. Obviously, your body holds your brain in it. If you do not nourish your body, then you cannot use your brain to execute, and you can't use your voice to talk. Like, you have to take care of your body, getting the right sleep, being outside, doing, exercise. That's all important. Mental well-being, again, the pandemic, what has this taught us? That, a lot of the human connection is super important for us to feel good about ourselves, to have the conviction to continue. And obviously the chief of staff in the leader role is a very demanding, stressful job. You have to have mental conviction in yourself and what you are doing in order to actually drive and inspire your teams. And then finally, on the spiritual level, it's like, why are we all doing this? I love philosophy. I'm a big nerd. Obviously, I went to Stanford, but there's also this program at Stanford, which is the nerd program at Stanford. So it's like a double nerd situation. And it's called Structured Liberal Education, which is a really terrible name, but it's really focused on reading humanities from the beginning of time till now. And, I just love the program, and because it really forces you to ask these questions. Who am I? What am I doing? Why am I here? What's the impact of society? And to have that clarity and have that spiritual well-being in your life again, gives you the conviction, the motivation, the energy to deliver for yourself and also for your team and the rest of the world. Um, it's so hard to be a founder, and then it's even harder in 2023 from all the things that we just talked about 30 minutes ago. And so having that spiritual connection to yourself, to your community, to the world, to the future generations, even. I mean, that is such a powerful source of inspiration and energy. And I highly recommend chiefs of staff and leaders to take a look at that and understand how it affects them in the professional world. You're going to win if you have strong well-being on those three counts, and your professional life and obviously your life is going to really benefit. So I could obviously go on and on. People on the call, ping me, tell me if you think I'm like off my rocker. Obviously, yeah, I grew up in California. I'm influenced a little bit by those methodologies and philosophies, but it's a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. And I really think that this type of conversation is going to come to the forefront over the next 10 years. The best people are going to be able to take care of their well-being and then some.
Awesome. Thanks, Mackenzie. And yeah, completely agree with you. I think there's the skill, will, and well-being. That's the third element, which really makes us better people as well as better professionals. So completely on with you on that. Mike has a couple of questions, and
Sure.
well, both are really interesting. But I'll pick one of the two. Here's the question: how do you deal with blurred lines in the roles between chief of staff and the chief strategy officer? So in our startup, we've had only a chief of staff doubling as a CSO at times. And how do you manage the transition better when there is, the COS to the CSO role?
Yeah, I'll do an analogy. So I wrote about the blurred lines between the COO, the COS, chief of staff, and then the CEO. And so it's like, hey, we gotta define our swim lanes, otherwise we're gonna step on each other, right? We want to make sure that it's clear what the scope of the roles responsibilities are. And obviously there's gonna be missteps, but let's get that documented on paper. Could be 30 minutes. It doesn't have to take a long time. That's one way of making sure that the lines are less blurred. For the chief strategy officer, usually that type of role comes in on later, more mature companies. And as you would probably expect, they have a strong management consulting background. And typically these people are pretty good at defining, what's in scope and what's not in scope, and being able to work through from a stakeholder to stakeholder standpoint. So that's where I would just invite a conversation, again, on the roles and responsibilities. Really, aligning also maybe with the capacity and the domain expertise. Obviously, if the chief strategy officer has domain expertise in ABC, put the projects that are ABC in their lap, right? So those are some things. I think the other thing too that the chief of staff does well though is that they're able to pull data and stakeholders from the rest of the org in quite effectively. So if it's a more like enterprise ranging initiative, maybe the chief of staff could take it on. But again, it's really that right type of triage system between the chief strategy officer and the chief of staff that makes sure that the lines are going in the right way, right? They're not being crossed.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mackenzie. So I'm also going to ping everybody the link to Mackenzie's playbook. This is one of the most comprehensive playbooks that we've read on the role of the chief of staff, and there's more to it. So those who would like to get their hands on it, please do click that link. I've just pinged it on the chat window. I'm sure you'll enjoy that read. So on that note, I'm just moving forward to another question which came up, which is on strategy execution. Because especially being part of Fitbots, we interact with a lot of chief of staff who are either sponsors of OKRs or championing OKRs. And is there something that you've seen that chief of staff do well, especially when it comes to strategy execution? And would love to hear your thoughts around that.
Absolutely. I mean, the CEO wishes that every single thought that comes into their head, which is the strategy, right? Every single thought, hopefully it's like defined on a roadmap, can just happen, right? Oh, we love wave that magic wand, and we're gonna fix that go-to-market engine that we talked about before. We're gonna get all the data together, and we're gonna know where this funnel is falling down, and it's just easy, right? You're just like make that happen, right? And then, of course, the chief of staff maybe in their mind is rolling their eyes like, yeah, of course, it's going to be on my plate. And, we got to pull these people together. We got to make this stuff happen. So absolutely, there's a connection between OKR, which is strategy setting component, and then actual execution. Very important for the chief of staff to impose the discipline and the rhythm of reporting and actual, work streams underneath that to make the strategy a reality. Also important for them to be able to collect data on where they're falling down on the metrics and on the outcomes so that they can recalibrate the OKR strategy in the first place, right? It's kind of a continuous feedback loop. So the chief of staff can, again, impose that rhythm of doing OKRs. They can follow up and collect the data from the successes and also the losses, right? From what the business is doing, surface it back up to the decision makers on the strategy that can inform the next cadence and setting of the strategy. So that's a really important point. Again, the CEO doesn't have time to execute on all the strategy. They need to have deep thinking time to actually know what to do next. And the chief of staff is their right-hand person, second in command, to make that a reality. Particularly when the chief of staff is being hired, I see it around the Series A, maybe B raise, and obviously the raise unlocks the capital for the chief of staff to come on. And one of the biggest, I think, initial projects is, well, they need to get up to speed. So they're like, what's the strategy? And then oftentimes we're like, oh yeah, it's kind of up here. And it's like, okay, so what are you doing about it? Like, oh, we kind of tell people do some stuff and then we kind of calibrate. So you don't really have the discipline. And like, okay, one of the first things to suggest is a lightweight OKR system that actually can make people go in the right direction, right? And hit the goals that the strategy is outlining for them.
Thanks, Mackenzie. And in fact, I'm also going to just think over a resource guide. We have a little checklist for chief of staff, especially who are coaching teams on strategy execution. And I'm sure you love this read. So feel free to download that content and make it part of your repertoire. So in fact, on that note, we've had a really good set of questions and interaction with Mackenzie yourself. And, thank you again to everybody who's joined in. Thanks, Aaron. We're happy that you love the insights and we do too. And I'm sure many of these pertinent points will help each of us in our role of chief of staff to really help the organization move forward. And if I need to really summarize many of the points that Mackenzie just shared, for those who missed the beginning of the webinar, the growth of the CEO, aiding the revenue growth, fundraising, product and people growth, these are some lenses in which the priorities of the chief of staff is going in 2023. And of course, that entire element of skill, will, and well-being all coming together. So Mackenzie, thank you so much for being part of this conversation and for sharing your rich expertise and experience in having worked with hundreds and hundreds of chief of staff across the globe. And if anybody from the audience needs to reach out to you, what would be the best way?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say follow my daily chief of staff content on LinkedIn. That way, you get access to my fresh off the presses content, and send me a DM, if you want to learn more about my services. My website is cedarchief.com, and you can check out that website on your own time. And obviously the playbook that Vidya put into the chat, it's a 42-page, 45 topic playbook that got 1,000 downloads in the first week, which was amazing. So go check those things out. And I'm here for any additional questions, and I'm at your service. So hit me up.
Thank you, Mackenzie, and thank you to everyone who's joined in. And we apologize we've not been able to take all the great questions, but you can definitely hit up Mackenzie on LinkedIn and have that chat and conversation. So on that note, have a great day and have a great rest of the evening. And, feel free to follow Fitbots so that we share our love on OKRs as well. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.